Hello and welcome to this special edition of Inside Sports. I'm your host, Todd Blackstock. Today our special guest is the Director of Marketing and Communications for the St. Louis Sports Commission, Mr. Brent Schulman. Brent, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me today, Todd.
You know, Brent, you guys, the Sports Commission, were Sports Commission of the Year in 2002, 2005, and 2013. And the way things are going this year, I think your chances are as good as any to get that award for 2017. You're coming off a huge month back in April of 2017, where you hosted several NCAA events, put it all together in under a month. How was that?
It was a busy time. You know, between March and April, like you said, we hosted 3 NCAA championships, starting with the NCAA Wrestling Championships. You know, it was the 8th time since 2000 we had it here in St. Louis. Also, the same weekend we hosted the Women's Frozen Four, which was an event we hosted for the first time. And then April, we followed up with the NCAA Women's Gymnastics Championships. And it was a great month, great for St. Louis, about $16 million in economic impact, and, you know, great success for all 3 events.
You know, you've got to have co-hosts and other universities and, you know, people like the Missouri Valley and the University of Missouri, you know, different people coming on board. But I really like the way that you spread that out over the month because, you know, you use Chaifetz in downtown St. Louis, you use Scott Trade Center, and then out in St. Charles, you got to utilize the Family Arena as well. Is that part of your strategic planning to spread the love around a little bit, or is it just a kind of what venues are open?
Absolutely. It's a huge part of what we do to try to get the entire region involved. And that's, like you said, you know, going out to St. Charles and hosting an event like the Women's Frozen Four there, and, you know, obviously our events at Scott Trade Center and Chaifetz, like you mentioned, but it's definitely a big plan of ours, whether it's, you know, involving, you know, anything on the east side of the river or even out to St. Charles too, is making sure that, you know, everyone in the region kind of has part of our events.
You know, usually the teams stay around the city areas, but when the Frozen Four is out in St. Charles, you know, you've got the Maryland Heights, you got Westport bustling. I remember seeing the whole team of the Boston University women's team out there, Boston College out there, and you know, they were having a good time, but you know, they're here to play obviously, but I really like the way you did that. As far as wrestling, I had no idea wrestling was such a huge, you know, spectator and television sport. I think they said 97% of people that were in town to watch wrestling or purchase tickets were from out of town. How huge is that?
It's really big for St. Louis and for the entire region overall, Todd. You know, it's one of those things too. We had 111,000 people over the 6 sessions, which we set an all-time attendance record, or sorry, top 3. So we now have those top records as well. But like you said, 97% come from out of town, so it's a really big event because they all kind of come in, you know, 3 days before the event and kind of experience all downtown has to offer as well. So
huge attendance this year at NCAA. That is awesome. I mean, St. Louis, like you said, 1, 2, and 3 in the all-time attendance in NCAA events, and it's a pretty good margin between 4 and 5 as well. Let's talk a little gymnastics. How'd that go? You had so many prominent gymnastic individuals here in St. Louis, and I thought you guys did a real nice job over at Chaifetz.
It's one of those sports, Todd, that we take a lot of pride in here locally just because of our, you know, popular gymnastics clubs in the region, you know, all coming together to kind of help with that event as well. You know, that event doesn't happen, you know, just like wrestling and some of our other events without hundreds of volunteers, you know, helping out. With NCAA gymnastics, you know, following up last summer when we hosted the Olympic trials for gymnastics, for the men's gymnastics and the national championships for the women. So following that up, and the you know, NCAA gymnastics is such a popular sport, and it's really becoming one of the bigger championships.
Yeah, it looked like you really got some momentum going from those trials, and to come and have that event here again. You know, I could hear people talking in grocery stores and just out and about wanting to go to that event and how fun it is. You've got the Missouri Valley continuing on at least for a few more years here in St. Louis. I know they'll be hosting their tournament again, and every year for the last 20-something years, Doug Elgin and the gang and the Sports Commission have teamed up almost every year in St. Louis at Scott Trade for that tournament. How huge is that every year?
Oh, it's huge. I mean, there's no better people in the business than the Missouri Valley Conference folks when it comes to putting on tournaments and postseason college basketball. You know, like you said, with Doug and Jack and Mike and Patty and the rest of the staff, they all do such a fantastic job, and you know, we're fortunate to partner with them on many events.
With Wichita State leaving the Missouri Valley tournament or conference, that's a big blow. And I've tried to talk to some of the guys, and they're kind of like in a wait and see approach right now. Do you know if they've gone on any discussions about thinking about the new team that may replace Wichita State, and how bad do you think that'll hurt the conference?
It's possible that they're having discussions in their conference office here in St. Louis, but I haven't heard anything about who they're approaching or who they're thinking about trying to replace Wichita State, which, as you mentioned, they've been a prominent team in the conference, the last several years. So it's going to be tough to replace them, at least initially, but may hurt them in the short term. But I have a lot of confidence in that crew to figure out the right replacement.
That's definitely a classy group. You've got a kind of a coup d'etat next year. You've got a big conference tournament coming to St. Louis, the SEC tournament. I know we wanted to touch on that a little bit, and I think that's really important because there's really no SEC team in St. Louis. So how'd you pull that off?
Well, a lot of that started the relationship with the SEC conference when the University of Missouri joined the SEC several years ago. And those discussions kind of, started happening after that. We're fortunate to be awarded the 2018 tournament. And our staff has seen it in Nashville the last several years, and they do such a great job down there. So, we'll be taking some of the stuff they do and try to, make it even better up here in St. Louis.
I'm sure you have Kansas City and some other people probably vying for those events as well. I mean, it's probably tough. I wanted to give you a big shout out and congratulations. Back in April of 2017 here, you guys announced after another bidding process, you've acquired a enormous amount of NCAA events to come to St. Louis in the next 4 or 5 years. Can you tell us about that and fill us in on some of the great action we've got coming to St. Louis?
Absolutely. We're fortunate that we were awarded a first and second round event for the NCAA postseason basketball, partnering with the Missouri Valley Conference on that. We do have another D1 wrestling event coming. One of the other events we're really excited about is partnering with Lindenwood on what's known as the Division II Festival. So that basically combines 6 Division II events into basically 1 week. So it'll all be out, taking place all over St. Louis, about 750 athletes that'll be coming in town for it total. And it's an incredible event. We're going to be hosting a lot of Division II events, whether it's Division II wrestling with Maryville University. They're our co-host for that again. There's also some Division II and III events. Tennis we're going to do with WashU. And we've got a whole host of other events that we're going to be bidding on in the future as well.
That's fantastic. Now, is the bidding process happen every 4 years? Because, you're announcing events, from 2018 to 2022. So is that how it works every 4 years, or is there?
It used to be that the NCAA would have a different process for each sport. And then 2 times ago, so back in 2013, they combined the whole process similar to what they just announced a couple weeks ago. And they said, okay, we're going to take all of our championships, kind of combine it into one process, let each city kind of plan out, their 4 years and what they want to bid on, and then kind of award based on that. So
I guess it was 2020 or 2022. It looks like the NCAA is coming to town, and the Missouri Valley will be hosting that tournament. That's a good sign to me that says that the Valley, might stay here in St. Louis. I know they have the contracts up every few years, and they have to review some things and see what's best for their, for their conference. But it sounds like they're going to be around for a few more years at least if they're going to be the hosting organization for that event.
Well, we're really fortunate to have the Missouri Valley Conference, here in St. Louis,
Yeah.
and like you said, between their postseason tournament and then also hosting a postseason college basketball, whether it's first and second rounds or regionals. So we couldn't be happier to have them here, and we hope that they keep their conference tournament here long term as well.
St. Louis voters went to the polls and they voted not to give the money for the soccer stadium adjacent to Union Station. In one regard, the people spoke. In another regard, I really think St. Louis County could maybe step it up a little bit. It seems like a lot of the fans come from the county. They come into the city. Maybe they can work on something perhaps in the county down the road. I don't think it's time to give up on soccer for the region.
I don't think so either. It's one of those things too where obviously we were a little disappointed as well in the result, just because it would have given us an opportunity to host, whether it's smaller championships, bigger championships like the College Cup, in a new soccer-specific stadium. But it's one of those things too where whether it's city, county, a combination, we'd like to see, in the future that something gets worked out there.
Before we let you go, last question. Scott Trade Center is, undergoing some improvements. You got to keep up with the times. I know there seems to be this war right now, and everybody's got to have the newest and the best stadium and all that. But there is a lot of truth to that. Did you ever talk to Frank about, the bidding process, and how important is it to keep the Scott Trade Center nice and clean and updated when trying to attract these big events?
Oh, it's extremely important, especially when we talk to any of our event partners or potential partners, whether it's the NCAA, the SEC, several other ones as well. They want our building to be in tip-top shape, because they go to other places like Nashville and Atlanta and, some of the new domes out there, and Minnesota is going to host wrestling in a couple of years. And, they want to see, improvements, whether it's, new scoreboards, new seats, new locker rooms, just new technology overall. And there's just so many new buildings, that have been out there and, created and, renovated since Scott Trade Center opened, over 20 years ago.
Well, Brent, thank you so much for taking time out of your huge schedule, hosting all these events and putting all this stuff, it really must be a busy schedule for you. And thanks for taking the time out today to join us.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me today, Todd.
All right, that's Brent Schulman. I'm Todd Blackstock. Thanks for watching this special edition of Inside Sports on STL TV. Experience St. Louis. We'll see you next time.